presidential election since new laws in 2020 created automatic voter registration for eligible Minnesotans, and it has drawn both immense support and backlash. Valley News Team's Quinn Gorham sat down with both lawmakers and the Minnesota Secretary of State to hear how this program works.
Lots has been said about the 2023 and 2024 Minnesota legislative session. After all, it was by far one of the busiest in state history. In the mix were several election laws, including automatic voter registration.
Over 65,000 Minnesotans have been able to be registered since it went into effect this past April.
Senator Liz Boldon was one of the biggest advocates for the bill when it went through the halls of power in 2023. According to Boldon, the law is designed to register eligible voters automatically when they visit the Department of Vehicle Services.
So if folks are renewing their driver's license, for instance, after they have moved and they have supplied the information necessary that that they are a citizen and that they live at their address and all of those pieces, it goes through the system and they get automatically registered to vote.
If you're going to register any person that's getting a license, you need to make sure there's plenty of vetting going on. That's where the Secretary of State and the Department of Vehicle Services come together.
The law is crystal clear. The only records that are to be transmitted to our office or any elections office are those where someone has shown proof of citizenship.
If we're going by Steve Simon's explanation, automatic registration might be a bit of a loose term. The Minnesota Secretary of State explained that enrollment hinges on providing proof of citizenship.
They must, when they're getting or renewing that driver's license, show a passport, a birth certificate, or naturalization papers. If they don't show those things, those records are not supposed to be transmitted anywhere.
The automatic registration law was passed around the same time as a bill that allowed driver's licenses for non-citizens. The combo drew criticism from some lawmakers.
There's now almost 500,000 people in Minnesota with legal resident IDs with no distinguishing marks that differentiates them from a legal U.S. citizen who's eligible to vote in this state.
Republican State Senator Mark Coran isn't a fan of the new law, but Simon explained that only those that show documentation should be registered. Coran's concerns mainly lie within the difficulty in managing such a system.
Are they being vetted thoroughly enough to ensure only citizens, legal U.S. residents, reside in that database?
Those concerns came to a head in August when the Secretary's office discovered that roughly 1,000 people had been registered without proper documentation. After confirming that none of the 1,000 had voted in the primary, Simon's office implemented new rules to improve its vetting.
What we said to them is, from now on, we think a reasonable thing that Minnesotans would approve of and really expect is we want two sets of eyeballs, two human beings, no longer just one. Two separate individuals looking over every one of these.
It doesn't fully solve all of Coran's concerns, but it does provide a solution to the mishap in the registration process. As of September, over 65,000 Minnesotans had been automatically registered to vote. Reporting in St. Paul, I'm Quinn Gorham.